Hello, this is Nick Freitas, and welcome back to Making the Argument. For today's show, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go over some of the things that are trending in the news, or some of the things that are conveniently not trending in the news. And we're going to break down what's going on, what are some of the arguments being made, how do we respond to it. We're going to filter through kind of the media narrative on some of these things, and hopefully provide a good perspective on some of the key issues that are showing up right now, or popped up either in the news or social media this last week. You have Ron DeSantis, who didn't do a lot of the more draconian measures, and all the press was essentially saying that Florida was going to be this wasteland, because also when you look at the percentage of senior citizens within a particular state, Florida has a huge population of senior citizens, and so you would naturally expect, when you have something like COVID that disproportionately affects people who have potentially compromised immune systems, or typically more elderly, you would naturally expect their numbers to be higher. But again, if you look at the number of COVID cases versus the number of COVID deaths, Florida ranks somewhere in the middle of the country, somewhere in the mid-20s. New York is second. But again, throw all of that out, because as far as the press was concerned, Governor Cuomo was the guy who was going to do it. The end result is that this equals out to be, I think it was over 15,000 COVID-related deaths to nursing homes. They only reported somewhere over 9,000. Right? So, I mean, just again, a 40% difference between what actually happened and what New York State reported to the federal government. Now, I want you to replace the name Cuomo with DeSantis, all right? Or replace the name Cuomo with Trump. Does anybody think CNN or MSNBC wouldn't be leading with this every day, all day? They'd have experts coming in talking about the catastrophic mistake this was, the absolute horrible mishandling, the potential legal charges that should be brought against them, impeachment charges that should be. Of course they would. What is the standard? Right, because I've been sitting in the Virginia House of Delegates listening to Democrats talk about, one Democrat literally said that Donald Trump was the equivalent of a war criminal, because he had made a statement where he had talked about downplaying the overall crisis, or downplaying the seriousness of it. Right, and again, I think this was reported by Bob Woodward, and so she said that makes him the equivalent of a war criminal, because Donald Trump said he's essentially a wartime president during COVID, and so he's a war criminal, and she wants to know how that's going to be dealt with. Okay, great. If that's the standard, then what should happen to Governor Cuomo? Allow me to make a recommendation. Go find a mirror and look in it. The institutions that we're supposed to trust to be able to fairly apply a standard and at least provide some sort of consistency, not only do they fail to do so, it's not incompetence, right? It's not incompetence at this point, it is deliberate. And the moment people lose faith in the media's ability to be able to provide, some measure of consistency, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? I think we all expect that there's going to be some sort of bias. Nobody's completely free of bias. We get it, all right? But this is ridiculous. Here's an opportunity to actually prove that there is an objective standard to which any administration, regardless of what political party they are, regardless if they've won an Emmy, regardless if they have a best-selling book, right? Please tell me that there's a standard that they can all be measured to equally. And if they fail to meet that standard, or if they engage in the sort of behavior and activities that the Cuomo administration apparently has at this point, then you have an obligation to enforce that standard. I've been told by members on the left, when they're making loose comparisons to everything from fascism to Nazism, even when they're making references to the Holocaust. In fact, her co-star made a reference to the Holocaust, comparing Jewish concentration camps in World War II to ICE facilities within the United States. Right? He made that comparison. I didn't see a great deal of outrage from the left when he made that kind of comparison. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's been uncovered at some ICE facilities here in a little bit. But again, what is the standard? Right? If the standard is that you're not allowed to make any sort of association with the Holocaust, or any of these sort of events, or the social conditioning that a government actively conducted in order to lead up to something like the Holocaust, if you're not allowed to mention any of that unless it's in perfect context, well then, I'm sorry, there's a lot of people on the left that are going to have to delete their Twitter accounts. And if someone came forward and said, look, this is why I don't think this is a fair comparison, I would be willing to sit down and analyze that argument and perhaps even agree with it. But the idea that you're going to fire her or suggest that she's anti-Semitic, that was the other thing I didn't understand, was this whole idea that, well, no, Gina Carano is anti-Semitic because she made that remark. No, she isn't. At what point in what I read off or in the meme that she put out did she say anything that was in any way supportive of the Holocaust, in any way, reducing the horror of it? I mean, you could make the argument, I guess, that since the comparison wasn't or if you believe it wasn't a fair comparison, you could make the argument that it was minimizing it. But I certainly don't think that was her intention, and there's nothing else that I can see within her Twitter history or social media history or her public comments that would ever suggest that she's anti-Semitic. And again, if that's the standard of anti-Semitism, I know a couple Democrat congresswomen that should probably be impeached here pretty soon. I'm sorry, is this the same Disney that filmed Mulan on site in China in the same region where the Chinese government is holding Muslims in concentration camps, and then thanked the government of China and the regional government for all of their cooperation as they filmed Mulan? Is this the same Disney? Would Disney like to cancel itself at this point in order to remain intellectually consistent? Potentially affect the business, and so they have a right to fire you. I am not questioning Disney's right to fire someone. What I'm questioning is, once again, the complete and total double standard that you are going to consistently apply those reasons across the board within the company. You're just not going to do it. I know you're not going to do it because you haven't done it, and because you are more than willing to ignore atrocities in places that you want to do business with, as is evidenced by Disney's catering to the communist Chinese government. Texas is one of those places that isn't associated or isn't used to or getting a huge cold front like what's moved in right now, and it has had devastating effects within their power grid. And this has caused both sides to run forward and offer a particular solution, right? So my attitude has always been, green energy, great. Renewable energy, wonderful. Allow it to develop within the marketplace, within a competitive marketplace, so that it can develop appropriately, geared toward making the best product possible based on consumer demand. It's just based on getting the best lobbyists in order to continue your subsidies. And I think it actually perverts the research and development process for green energy. So if you want green energy, my argument has been, great, go within the marketplace and allow those factors in order to ensure that it's going to develop and it's going to progress and it's going to evolve in a way that actually makes it sustainable within the marketplace and a genuine alternative to fossil fuels. Don't do it in such a way to where it's just political manipulation and whoever has the best lobbyist wins. To point out that when you tell the energy company that you have to start allocating resources toward green energy, those resources have to come from somewhere. And they are not, at least right now it looks like in Texas, that was not exclusively made up for by increased rates. Because that's why we had huge problems, and a source of the wildfires out there was not just because PG&E was being lazy with respect to its power lines, it's because the state government, the politicians that were all very green energy friendly, told them, don't spend money over here, you need to spend it on this. You need to meet these goals. And if you don't meet those goals, you're going to be in trouble. So what did they do? They allocated resources away from power line maintenance over to meeting green energy goals. Right? I suspect the same thing happened in Texas. Right? I have no problem with renewables. I have no problem with green energy. I do have a problem with the government manipulating the process in favor of technology, which is clearly not at a stage that it can provide the sort of resiliency we expect to see, especially when you have a major weather event like this in a place that's not used to getting it, and now all of a sudden people are without power, they're without water as a result.